welcome everybody to Sensuality versus Sexuality webinar. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Paula Quincy. I am a relationship expert and author and speaker, and I work with individuals and organizations around cultivating and creating healthy relationships at home and in the workplace. And primarily when I work with individuals, I work with couples from a relationship perspective and family dynamics and relationship dynamics. And I also run men's and women's programs around personal growth and development. And in the workplace, it's about healthy relationships in the workplace, primarily dealing with things like conflict management, team dynamics, behavior profiling, as well as personal development and what they often call soft skills training. And I've written 2 books, Embracing No, which is around boundaries and how to say no and be okay with it. And my other book, Embracing Conflict. And it's around how to embrace conflict and deal with conflict in a way that is opportunities for growth. Because conflict is often seen as a horrible, ugly thing, an awkward thing, which is why we avoid conflict and we don't like talking about it. But often that just leads to more problems and complications in our relationships. Sari, over to you. Tell everyone a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Sari Cohen. I'm the owner of a Sensuality Emporium. Welcome. I got into the sex toy industry from my passion to help people to connect with themselves and with their own pleasure, coming from a background of optometry and fitness industry, which is completely different, but a little bit the same. You work with people closely in small rooms, and they tend to talk a lot and tell and share stuff with you. And I found that a lot of people were sharing, if it's in the eye examination room or on the floor when we were doing exercises together, quite intimate stuff. And that prompted me eventually to look into the sexual side, because I realized that a lot of the complaint was around what is happening in the bedroom and do themselves with themselves and their own sexuality and their own pleasure. And that's what got me. Initially, it was more focused on women, but the more I grew in the business, I realized that men need as much support as women. The couple work was also usually encouraged from the women's side, that I want the women to bring the men to the conversation. But then I also learned and realized that it's many times it's the man that wants to bring the woman to the conversation, and the dialogue needs to open. So I created the Emporium, which is basically a room in my house which function as a shop and a consulting room, which people feel very, very comfortable to come and shop and look at the product and ask questions. And in general, I will be often the first step to ask question and expose the fact that there may be issues, which then I'll need to refer, and that's when I will refer to specialists like Paula and others in my network to give them professional support if need be, and what toys cannot solve.
Awesome. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, because as I said, often, this topic comes up when I'm working with couples, but it comes up from a slightly different perspective when I'm working with couples. And it kind of, as we go through the conversation and as they start feeling a little bit more, I guess, safer, secure, braver, and comfortable in the space and the conversation, when couples say to me that they have intimacy problems, I know that they're actually talking about sex, because often sex and intimacy is confused as one and the same thing. And so from the perspective where I work from, intimacy when it comes to couples and relationships, it's the way I describe it is very simple, but I know it's not as simple as this, but just for way of clarification, and that they can kind of get the context of what the difference is between the two. As I always say to people and couples, that intimacy is everything that happens outside of the bedroom, and sex is what happens in the bedroom. Although it's not as cut and dried as that, because obviously intimacy happens in the bedroom too. But it's more around intimacy, is around that feeling of closeness, being connected, affectionate, the way you speak to each other, the way you treat each other, how safe you feel with each other, not only physically, but emotionally, how you kind of kiss and cuddle and hold hands and those kind of things. And then obviously in the bedroom, sex is what we call so the physical deed, the physical doing side of it, and the intimacy is the feeling side of it. But sorry, from your perspective, and when you're working with couples, what comes up for you? Because I know often there's sensuality and sexuality. So let's talk about those 4 elements.
Yeah, so basically when we talk about sexuality, sexuality is, and if you look at it at the dictionary even, it's basically the habit and the desires that a person has. So that if you know your sexuality, you know what type of sexual being you are, if you're gay, if you're straight, if you enjoy certain things sexually. When we talk about the sensuality side, is the expression and suggestions of physical connection with specifically sexual. So, and that immediately connect to pleasure and satisfaction. And you cannot separate the two, because if you don't know your sexuality, you can't have the sensuality. You can't actually know your pleasure if you don't know your sexuality side of your personality. And those things, first and foremost, before you can even communicate them, you need to basically describe it to yourself and explore it to yourself. And unfortunately, many couples, when they arrive to me and they said, we don't have sex anymore, the sex is not so great anymore, or the sex was never that great, that comes from the fact that they don't know their own sexuality, and they definitely don't know their own pleasure and what moves them and turns them on. And without knowing that, you can't expect to be able to communicate it to someone else. So if you can't communicate it to oneself, you can't then obviously communicate it to another. They're all very entwined and connected with each other, as you said, intimacy as well. Usually when they come to me, it's easier for them to identify the problem as the sex. Before they will say there is a problem in the marriage or in the relationship. It's something's not working, something not functioning, she is not turned on, then something is broken. It's a physical thing that they can immediately put the finger on. And that's why they will come and seek help. They will want a pill that will make magic and make her horny and like I don't know what, and like a bitch on heat, excuse the better. And he'll phone me and say, don't you have a pill like that? And then I explain that maybe a pill is not a solution, and we'll go to the intimacy and say, but if you have money to spend on a pill and she's going maybe through a hard time, why don't you just buy her some flowers to work on your intimacy and your connection, rather than give her a pill to make her horny. And those are this is how people, I think this is why they start the conversation here and with me, because they identify something that is not working. I can't orgasm anymore. I don't have erection, physicality. And that obviously take us to the talk about what is your sexuality, what you find sensual, what gives you sexual satisfaction. And often when confronted with those questions, they kind of don't even have an answer.
And I see this often with couples, particularly if they've been together for longer periods of time and children have come into the play, and it's obviously changed the relationship dynamics. And so the whole focus and attention goes on to the children and running the household and the daily grind of life, so to speak. And it becomes less about them as a couple and a relationship, and making each other a priority. And obviously with that, sex is not a priority anymore either, because often I have couples saying to me, we're too tired, we don't have time to have sex, and when we are, then the kids are always around, kind of thing. And so that's one aspect that comes in. But then also, the longer couples are together, they get into a routine. A routine can become a rut can become complacent, and a big complacency, it becomes boring. So how do you kind of deal with that when that comes up, when they come to see you?
when it comes to the boring, it often comes, they will stand and even if they come as a couple, they'll come and say, we are together for 14 years now, it's time to spice things up. They really always make a point to say how long they've been together, so they're not looking for excuses of something's wrong with us, they're justifying the fact that they're exploring with the matter of it's time to spice things up, because obviously they felt that something has changed and maybe they got a little bit tired of doing the same things, or maybe now they close enough to talk about the new things, which before they were not. And then, yes, a lot of things can work. Sometimes we just talk about when they come here, they want to try something. And then I explore what they want to try. Often it will again be just very basic. They're just going to add some lubrication that they didn't use before, some sensual massage oil that they'll take just to create that touching each other again, just to create that, again, physical intimacy, not only just the act of the sex, and they will start with something like that. Often they already come with an idea. They will go for, obviously after the 50 Shades, so people will go and come for light bondage. We don't talk full-on BDSM, but light bondage, maybe eye cover and very basic stuff. And then obviously they can also look at a vibrator and things that they can use together. And that's when always comes the question when people ask me, we're here together, we want to get something together. And I always tell, even when I do ladies night, I always tell the girls, and I always tell everybody, every toy that we have here in the shop, every vibrator, every can be used together. It doesn't mean that you are using it on yourself. Those what we call body massager. It can be, it can be a small things like that that fits at the palm of my hand, that doesn't look like anything erotic, but it vibrates very strongly, that can give a full body massage. You can give her a nice massage and give her a massage. You can give him a massage and use it with. It's a new sensation. It's something that you've never felt before. And that is a very good start to spice things up. And that takes me obviously to explain in more detail how to use them and give some suggestions, where to put them between the couple, how to use them on the body, and really go with them through the process of what can be done with something small like that vibrates. And that's really, you see there's a light going. People are like, oh wow, wonderful. It doesn't have to be what we saw in that accidental pic in a porn that we never intended to open, just opened like that. And we saw those big dildos and big things that like, well, no, we're not going to do that fair. And that really put things in ease, and there's a lot of opportunity to try different things, but always in a holistic, always trying to figure out what is the issue. Are the kids in the house? Is there other things? And put the ideas that maybe that's just to go away for the weekend. Maybe if there's an option to put the children with a granny somewhere, or just to get yourself that special time together, even if it doesn't end with sex. Just to be together without, and create yourself this environment of coupleness. That always something that comes up in couples when they walk in here. Just it's always the issue. It's actually always the issue.
Yeah. Something that comes up when I'm working with couples is, so there's two aspects to this. One is obviously there's different libidos. So one may have a higher sex drive than the other. And there's often frustrations that, you know, my partner wants sex all the time, or they want more sex than and I'm just like, I'm not in the mood, or, you know, it doesn't faze me if I don't get it that often. And, you know, there's always the question is, well, what's normal? What does a normal sex life look like? and obviously that answer is, well, how long is a piece of string? Because every couple is different, you know, and it's how you learn to please each other. And then linked to that, or maybe let's deal with that first, and then I'll share the next question with you.
Yeah, it's a problem when couples are not compatible on that level. It does create frustration and it does create problem. I more see the older couples coming in, and he wants and loves her and adores her and thinks she's the most beautiful thing on earth, and she's being through perimenopause and menopause, and her libido just plummeted, and he's really missing her. He often is going to come alone to the shop and just ask to buy a masturbator because he doesn't want to cheat on her. And this is a difficult one because I want them to be together. He needs to discuss those things with them. And unfortunately, I think in cases like that, there's really a space to have consulting with the woman a bit separately and the man, and then together, so they understand. There are couples out there, and we're not talking about people that have sex 3 times a day. We're talking about normal people that just want a little bit of sex from time to time. We're talking about people in their 60s and 70s even, and they've been forever waiting since 48 when she started with the perimenopause and after, and says she doesn't see I love her, she's beautiful, I want her to enjoy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have sex, and I wanted to have orgasms, and I wanted to have pleasure, and it is a difficult gap that they need to bridge. Other situation when there's complete lack of compatibility, that the man or the woman is really, sex drive is very, very high. I've seen, unfortunately, I'm sure you did as well, marriages that didn't survive that. Unless they open to open relationship, and this is also very up today, polyamorous and things like that really really are a thing that has become more and more talked about and open. Then there is an issue. Then there is an issue, and it's difficult because if someone doesn't want or doesn't enjoy or doesn't have the same sex drive, then you have a problem. You can't force sex drive on someone.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are all different.
So just to everyone that's joined us, if you would like to ask a question, please do post it in the chat group on anything that we've chatted about. If you've got a question or comment or something else you'd like us to touch on, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end. And as I said, if you are shy and you don't want everyone to see the question you're asking, please, you can post it anonymously either to Sari or myself, and we will answer it for you. Sorry, coming back to, because what you were talking about is just touched on another issue or topic that often comes up when I'm working with couples. And so the two aspects is, one, why couples often find it so hard to talk about sex. It's a touchy subject, it's an awkward subject, and they don't often talk about it, so that gets swept under the carpet, and it just kind of festers, and over the years the resentment and all of that starts coming out. And then linked to that is obviously, I don't think couples are aware, or they often underestimate how our upbringing influences and shapes us in terms of the type of environment and how sex was spoken about in the household when we grew up, how natural things were in terms of our bodies and nakedness, and whether it was a conservative background. So I'm just going to generalize and say the good Catholic girl, for example, versus your partner who was potentially more open-minded, conversations happened, or has had a little bit more experience than potentially the conservative, because obviously those stereotypes and conditioning where, wait until your wedding day and be a virgin and all of those kind of things. Obviously generational, older couples still have that. The younger couples are, and we'll talk about the younger couples because you've touched on polyamory already, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yes. It's interesting because I always get those, I always laugh. Background and the way we were raised is really, really huge issue, and people are quite aware of that. They will come in and they will say something like, I really want to drive up my wife. You know how she is. She's Afrikaans. And then the wife will, you come and you know how my husband is, he's Afrikaans. Or then I got the girl that says she's Koza and he's Koza. And it goes throughout. And it doesn't matter where they come. You know, my mother, my wife, she's like, you know, she's coming from a Jewish background, very traditional. And they all saying that, and I often laugh and say, wasn't that your wife here yesterday telling me that her husband is Afrikaans? Why don't you talk to her about that? Because they think they can't, but they do. And what I like a lot about the sex toys, and that's what I found, they actually a fantastic tool of communication. And it's one of the things, especially when I work only with the women, I said, this is a fantastic tool of communication because it is basically a gadget. And first of all, guys love gadgets. Second, it is a technical things that you need to talk about. So you need to charge it, and then you need to touch it and feel. And then you go over the button, you press, and you find all the different settings. And then when you're using it together, and some of them even have apps and all those things. So this is definitely techno, and the guys really love that. And then there is the whole issue of now you're using it together and you have different settings. So you put it on weak and it's fine, but then now you have to communicate if you want it to go a bit stronger. So you actually have to tell him, please make it stronger. Please make it stronger. Or change that setting. Oh, I actually love that setting better. You know, I never thought I'm gonna love that so strong, but it's actually nice. And it brings people to communicate because it's so easy for us to communicate around technology. Because if I'm gonna show you my new cell phone, you're immediately gonna go, oh, is that the new Samsung? It's really easy for us. We're really techno savvy. Everybody are. And when it comes to things like that, it is really easy to start the conversation around the technology. But what you're saying about relationship and old-fashioned and what we were brought up as, I found that unfortunately young people as well, and especially young women, and that's something I would like to put to you, are actually saying, no, I don't care. I let him choose. I let him decide for me. He knows what I like. If that's what he likes, then it's fine. If he says he wants to bring a toy, I'll go with it. And that is, or he will say, no, she said I can bring whatever I want. I told her she didn't want to come with me, and I'm going to bring, she trusts me on that. And the women also will come and say, no, he knows what I need. He needs to know. And for that hurts me when I hear, but I'm sure you're hearing it a lot as well, that the women just sort of like surrender control, and not in a BDSM surrendering control type of way, but more of like, this is not the girl's job.
Yes,
it's
definitely.
To do that. How do you deal with that? It's so frustrating.
I think, first of all, as you mentioned right in the beginning, it's about, as women, we've been stereotyped and conditioned that we must be the good girls, not naughty girls. And, that sex is something that is done to us, not necessarily something that we participate in. And that we have needs, and it's perfectly normal for women to have needs just like for men. And it's okay for women to express those needs. We've also been conditioned, and again, I'm generalizing from a generational perspective, but that sex leads to procreation in terms of having children, and that it's not necessarily a pleasurable thing and something that you enjoy. And it actually starts long before we even become women or reach that age of puberty. A lot of the research shows that a woman's sense of self-worth and self-confidence and self-belief is shaped by the relationship she has with her father from a very, very young age, and how her father interacts with her, which is obviously very different to sons, and the kinds of messaging that we teach our daughters, and how we integrate, or how dads interact and engage with their moms, because we pick up the cues from our parents' relationships when it comes to sex and sexuality and being comfortable with that. So first of all, from a woman's point of view, it's helping her get to understand her own sexuality and sensuality, and to explore her own body and know her own body. Because if you don't know your own body, how can you tell your partner what pleases you, you know? And then teaching them how to communicate about it in a safe way, where it, if it's difficult to talk about it face to face, then perhaps, you know, things like write each other letters, or voice notes, or after you've had intercourse or sex or made love, to give feedback, what you enjoyed about it, and it's not about what didn't work. It's very important, the language that we use, because it's such a touchy subject. So the language is important. That will, you know, this was this, or you did that. It's around how to express that about, I really enjoyed this, or this really made me feel this, or this is, you know, but also to know what your no-go zones are, or your deal breakers are. So for example, role play, and this, you know, obviously falls into your domain more, but it's more around knowing what your I call them hotspots. You know, some people have no-go zones. So for example, don't kiss me on my neck, because it just, I don't enjoy it. It actually turns me off. It doesn't turn me on, all those kind of things. So, and then it's helping them have a conversation around obviously their upbringings. And then from a male's point of view, it's helping him understand and how to be there for his partner. And it's more around creating emotional safety, which is the area that I work in, so that they can start having sex and that, and then obviously they can step into your world, which is how do we explore and be adventurous and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting, because what's interesting as well, I see that couples that have been a bit older and the kids are out of the house are now starting to communicate. Even traditional couples, like what we'll call here traditional couples, but unfortunately that doesn't trickle down to the young. They will not talk about it with their children, and then I get the young professionals that are clueless. And that is also, I think there is a huge lack of sexual and education in all over the world for the youth and for people, for children even. And it needs to be done obviously in the level that they are, but there is lack of that, and they ending up here at different ages, young, and we're talking under 30, that never, they are sexually active but don't have pleasure. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to give themselves pleasure, and they don't know how to express the pleasure. And it's not of lack of access to information or anything like that. It's just, it's puzzling sometimes. They just, with someone in relationship, they just don't do it right, you know, and they will not do it for themselves.
And I think that talks to, you know, when you think about where do we have sex education, if we don't get it from our parents in terms of the birds and the bees talk, and generally when it's the birds and the bees talk, it's more around like, make sure that you don't fall pregnant, and make sure that you don't get sexually transmitted diseases and those kind of things. And, you know, and sex education at school, it's all around how to put a condom on properly and those kind of things. So it's very clinical. It's very, I don't know, routine and boring, I guess, is the words that come to mind.
It should fall under biology, not under sex.
There we go. There you go. I see Michelle says, I do think that the more a woman grows into herself and learns to love and accept herself, it becomes easier to discuss this in a relationship. You can allow yourself to have fun. And I think the more we find ourselves and open to ourselves, the more we allow ourselves in life. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I have a question for you that someone has sent me. And you touched on it earlier, and this is around perimenopause and menopause, in terms of how do you help your partner? How do you be there for your partner? How do you satisfy your partner when you know that they are going through this? Potentially, there's obviously hormones or lack of interest or libido. What are some of the things that a man can do to, obviously from an affection and intimacy point of view, but then obviously the sexuality point of view, how do they deal with it? How do they cope with it?
Yeah, so it's a difficult one. And I think, from even personal experience, Being perimenopausal and getting into menopause is basically the stage that your natural menstruation stop. In the past, it wasn't a big issue. Women were menstruating, then they stopped menstruating, and that was it. There is a drop in estrogen in the body, and that obviously what drives what we call libido, and that creates all sorts of side effects. It's the libido, it's the hot flashes, it's the sweaty nights, it's many other things, irritable, just like women can be behaving as if they're like premenstrual, like all the time, which can be, some of us can be quite witches, and that puts a lot of strain. And it can also take a long time. Perimenopause can start for women from the early mid 40s, even some before, and can go up to in the 50, 55 until menopause hit. And menopause is after you had your last period, and then after that last period, a year of no menstruation at all, and then blood tests can be taken to just confirm that the lady is completely menopausal now. But that's just the biology around it. You have to treat gently. First of all, it's always important that a woman in that age will go and check herself regularly, and if the symptoms are very hard, and that's what my doctor also told me, as long as you can manage it and it doesn't affect your daily life, like not your work, not your relationships, not your behavior, you're not suffering, then you're fine. But the moment that things are really affecting the relationship, and you feel that you are not yourself in such a way that affects everybody around you, that's time to speak to the doctor and get some hormone therapy. There's alternative therapies. There are many options, and a good gynecologist will guide through the different options that the lady has according to her situation. So it's not just automatically we go into our hormone therapy treatment. You actually have to find yourself a good doctor that specializes in that. Many of the gynecologists are, and they then say just to balance the situation a little bit. For the men in that situation, there will be hard times. It's just a matter of patience, not to force yourself, create more intimacy than sexual opportunity. And when the sexual opportunity comes, just take it with grace. It is definitely something that that is difficult. One of the things that happens when the libido is low and there's a drop of hormone, that it takes a long time to actually reach an orgasm because the connections are not there. I actually had a chat about it with a gynecologist, Dr. Sheena Johnson. She also agreed with me. Women at that stage should masturbate and should actually encourage to have more orgasm and more sexual pleasure. It releases endorphins. It reminds the body how wonderful it is for them. But saying that it's easier than actually doing it, because it's a mission to orgasm sometimes. There is no connection. You feel unconnected to your body sometimes. And that makes the orgasm taking long, and then the husband gets frustrated, and then she feels embarrassed. So it's a vicious circle of non-orgasmic, and eventually she says, leave it, doesn't matter, I'll not. And for that, there are actually some items that we sell, not necessarily pills and magic, but some items that we do have that helps reach orgasm faster. And some traditional orgasm, people that deal with natural orgasm might not like that, but for many women that struggle to orgasm, some of those toys that are designed to really give quick orgasm, it just puts them in that orgasmic states. It helps them just to go through it faster. And I know we're not looking for just the big O, we're talking about intimacy, and we're talking about the hugs, and we're talking about the connections. But yeah, as a man wants to see his wife orgasm, it's part of the whole thing. It's part of his turn on as well. It's part of him making her satisfied as well. And it's important to the relationship. It's a dynamic that is disturbed by not having, that the wife is not having pleasure. And it is, so there are some things that one can try if she's open to it. I tell my clients in that situation, the girls, just don't give up, girls. Just do whatever it takes. Just masturbate or whatever. Just have orgasms. You have to connect to that happy space. And I tell it to myself as well. Be very open about it as well. I do what you preach. Some days like, oh, did I go without having sex and then ignoring my husband for a week? That's wrong, girl. You know, that's. But it needs to be, the discussion needs to happen, and I'm sure that the wife is aware that there's changes. we do, and we also bloat, and we then hate ourselves, and yeah.
And I think that's the important thing, that we normalize it, because it is a natural thing that happens. And already there's an awkwardness about it. So it's, how do you try and reduce the awkwardness as much as possible? So normalize that this is something natural and normal that happens. And it's happening to us. It's not just happening to you, because you're in this together. You're a partnership, and you're there to support each other through it. I definitely recommend that my couples take the pressure off each other, that they have to have sex, because that just adds more stress, and then it almost becomes a duty and an obligation and a resentment. So take the pressure off. As Sari said, focus on building the intimacy first, and focus on that. And when that intimacy and that connection is there, generally it will spill over into having sex and that, and you know, it may be here and there, it may be far few in between, you never know. So as she says, just go with the flow and accept it with grace, but also just talk about it in terms of, you know, maybe how you can please each other in different ways, where you just both still feel, you know, fulfilled and satisfied and connected, because there are many ways of doing that. That doesn't necessarily mean physical penetration as well.
True. And apropos physical penetration, I forgot to say something that happens is dryness of the vagina, and lubrication goes a long way. This is one of the first signs of menopause. And just if it pains, then if it's painful, they don't want to do that, then just a little bit of lubrication can really help.
And I see Michelle says menopause is exhausting.
Amen to that.
If anybody does have any other questions about what we've been chatting on so far, please do pop them in the group, in the chat group, or or anonymously. If anybody wants to ask a question now, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask us. Maybe give a minute or two if there is anybody there. Okay. Sorry, one thing that that comes up is where, so this is a real case study that I'm going to use, and I'm not going to mention names or anything, but I had a situation with a couple that I was working with where he was actually the conservative one, and she wanted to be a little bit adventurous. She wanted to bring in some toys and some potions and lotions and stuff, because she had experienced this in her previous relationship and was quite, you know, open to experimenting and having some fun. But that relationship ended, and a year or so, a couple of years later, got involved into a new relationship and wanted to bring this into the relationship. And her new partner was very conservative and dead set against any toys or anything coming into the bedroom, and almost on the verge of that it was something like dark and seedy and sordid, that, you know, sex toys. So how do you go around that situation? Because normally it's the woman that's the conservative.
It's a difficult one. You can't just dismiss people's feelings and probably misconceptions regarding the whole field. The sex toys industry have a bad reputation, unfortunately. It's becoming more and more mainstream, but it is definitely something that we were warned against and scared of. There's also the very big issue of what is wrong with our sex, or why do you need that? It's an offending side. It's what you don't need a toy, am I not enough for you, what we do. And to put it in a more everyday language, and I try to tell her to do with the men, is just to explain that there's nothing wrong with the sex. But it's just like, let's say, for example, if he goes to gym. When we go to gym and we go to gym and want to look better, we don't do the same routine every day. We do twice a week cardio, and then we do 3 times a week weights, and then we change for some kickbox, and then we change to some other type of exercise. Because if we're going to do the same exercise again and again, we're eventually going to stop seeing results. So we have a routine, but we change them and we learn new things and new exercises to improve the result that we received in the gym. And I found that guys really take to the gym thing. They understand that, because if they go to gym, they know that. But it's the same thing, you know, you're driving every day to work the same way, the same way, the same way. You know the road, you don't even look at the road anymore. It's dangerous now because you're not looking at the road anymore. And that is exactly the same. If she can in some way find something that will talk to him and something that he does, that is a routine that he changes because it's beneficiary to change, then she can get to him. And the discussion need to happen. I find that the men, it's not necessarily a matter of conservative. It's a matter of it can be a matter of a lot of times insecurity. And I will never forget that my friend told me one day that she went and we were speaking about what underwears we were wearing, and I said, I always wear G-string, and she said, oh, I never wear G-string. So why? So when she once went and she bought G-string, and she came home and she took the pants off and she was wearing G-string, her husband had a look and said, what are you wearing? Are you a hooker now? And he was like, there's a G-string from Woolies. Take that thing off. There's just hookers wear G-strings. And it was such a laugh, but funny enough, years later, I know him very well. He walk into my shop, we laugh. He's not that conservative, but it was just something that she for years didn't dare after that to bring up the topic, because she thought it's concerning. I don't know, talk to him about it. It's fine, you need to know. But that's exactly the first response of someone to an idea, usually a way to move away from that, if it makes sense.
So I see we've got about 15 minutes left. So we will open it up for Q&A at the end, but if there are any questions that anybody would like us to answer, either on things that we've spoken about already or something that maybe we haven't touched on yet, please feel free to post your question in the chat or send it to us anonymously. So, Sari, you mentioned something around you touched on it around, while we were talking about the conservativeness and stuff like that. But as couples are together for longer, we obviously know that we get into that routine and that spark can go. What would you suggest for couples in terms of how do they bring the spark back? How do they keep the spark alive? And people, when I've heard couples talking about it, they go, oh, the romance is gone. It's often referred to as the romance is gone in the work that I do. What are some of the things that you would suggest?
The romance needs to be made. It's just need to be made. You have to keep on remembering why you are in that relationship. If you can't for every minute of your day remember, doesn't matter when you get pissed at each other and things go pear-shaped and thing happens, you still have to always remember, why are you here in this relationship? There was something, there was always something. There was love, hopefully. There was something, there was attraction. It was physical attraction. It was the smell that brought you together. It was experiences that brought you together. You've been through a lot together already. Use those things to rekindle the romance. Do stuff like you used to do. Just from my personal experience, I'm with my husband for over 30 years, and we've got the things that we do. So it doesn't have to be sex. Just lie on the couch on Friday evening with a glass of whiskey and listen to the music that we used to dance to when we were 16. And that's keeping the romance. That's because now we're singing those songs together. And now I'm standing and remember the moves we used to do. And now this is keeping the romance. It's doing those little things. And when it comes to more physical stuff, and that, then always doing it. I always tell the girls, especially when they have children also, and there's no time for foreplay. So everything that we do is foreplay. If I cook in the kitchen and he comes and he touches me, that's foreplay. If I pass him in the passage and way to the toilet and I just grab him in the nipple and give him a twist, that's foreplay. It doesn't matter that we're only going to have sex like a week later, but it is all registered in our body and our mind, and we remember that. And a lot of little things, little messages, little funny things, dinners, date nights, everything goes. I had to work on it. It's because I don't feel it is work. It's just a reminders all the time, remembering why are we here? Why are we here? And appreciate the fact that we are still here and we're still together, and that we are, and there must be something good there. Otherwise we will not be together anymore after all this time, to let it get that dry, to let it get so dragged. So yes, keep on communicating, keep on doing those little silly things for each other to keep it interesting. Remember when you were young, keeps you young.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I see we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to open the floor to anybody here that would like to ask a question or make a comment, or just share the thoughts that might have come up for you while we've been chatting. Now's the time. Floor is yours. Either everybody is shy or we've done a fantastic job of answering everyone's questions. Sorry.
Oh, they're watching the news and just left the channel open. Watching a movie.
I can't think the news would be more interesting or exciting than this conversation.
Oh, they're talking about the lottery number.
So a question from, sorry, I'm just looking, we've had a few. So Michelle says, that's beautiful. You've been doing a great job, ladies. Good conversation. Thank you. Just wanted to say thanks. Very interesting. You're welcome. So we've got a couple of minutes left. So sorry you touched on this, but there always this so there's a question that's come through, and is there a typical age that a woman's sex drive completely drops? There is obviously from a guy's side, so kind of around 60, and it's the perception is that he battles with an erection, those kind of but there's a perception there. But is there a typical age that sex stops completely for women versus men?
So some women going through the dip during the menopause, but then it settles and they heat up like flame. I get women here like they're liberated. They love their body and they love their fat ass and they love the rolls on the stomach. They came to complete love of themselves and now they're ready to action. The men are usually they can keep on going for quite a lot, not always the same. They come for some boosts of maybe some pill or something, not Viagra, there's some other stuff, some penis ring to help them with the blood flow and to maintain the erection a bit longer. That's when they're healthy. I found that men generally would like to keep on having sex, no problem, and as long as they have a wanting partner. And I must tell you a story before we end. One day, the couple, they phoned me to see if I can see them privately. And they were very German. I can hear the accent. And they walked in here. She was helping him with one step at the entrance. The one step she was holding him was wearing his cardigan. And they were sitting here and we were chatting. and they were telling me that they have a little bit of problems. Then he needs erection, and he heard that it's going to be good if you're going to put a ring just to maintain the blood flow. And then they were very, very happy to tell me that she's 79 and he's 83, and they're not married. They met at the old age house, and they both widows. and I said, well, we're talking about it. Then I mentioned that maybe a little bit of lubrication to first put the ring on so it won't hurt him, and maybe for the lady. And he gives her a hand and he said, she doesn't need anything. She's great. And you know what? It was so beautiful. They were so happy. My older client is 87, a woman that met a younger man. He was in his mid-70s, and she was finally having sexual relationships again, and she was over the moon. What she didn't expect was that because she didn't use it for a long time, because she was widowed and then she didn't have for many years, that things shrank. So girls, if you don't use it, you lose it. And because obviously it's shrinkage because of the dryness and all the other things. But yeah, you can always enjoy sex. And it saddened me when I meet women and they think, oh, I don't need that anymore. I don't do that anymore. I used to enjoy it when I was young. And I'm asking her, so how old are you? And she's telling me 50. And I'm like, I'm 50. I said, and no, it's not over. It's not, you can still enjoy it. And then you get those people that really having fantastic time. So there are issues that are coming. There are medical issues, and for men it's important obviously to check prostate issues and things like that, blood pressure, sugar, all that effect. And guys that neglect themselves can have issues with that in later stage, and they must be always on the ball from a medical point of view. But I find that, people are sexually active quite late into their life, which is a nice promise, something to look forward.
So there's hope for all of us. That's what you're saying, right?
Definitely. Definitely. It's
and then
something
something
that life.
It's part of life. It's what we do. We are. It's part of being a human being. But the last thing I wanted to touch on before we end is something that is often, I guess, overemphasized and almost made to be a chore, which is this whole thing about foreplay, and that you've got to spend minutes, like you've got to spend 20, 30 minutes, hours with foreplay with the woman first before, she orgasms and stuff like that. And you actually touched on it earlier, and that foreplay happens long before we get to that point where we have sex. And this is often where, intimacy comes in. Intimacy is foreplay. And,
yep.
and it's not what and I suppose maybe porn has ruined it for us, because all of our perceptions, I think, come from that era. And I'm talking generations ago, where, all these sort of innuendos and mechanical sex, we see it, and it's not real. So talk to us about foreplay.
So as I said, foreplay is definitely everything that happens outside the bedroom. And some guys are still, or girls going to still for the nipple, you dry, when you finally go in, and you just lie there and you expect that. There's a lot of different scholars and from the world that cherish foreplay. If you look at tantric sexuality, there's a lot of things to be learned and to be practiced, and people try different things. I know people that really can prolong sexual and stimulation and sensuality for very long hours. If they have the time, if they have the space and the technique, they can go for hours on what we will call foreplay, but it's basically the sensuality. It is that whole that goes around it with erection, with keeping on the edge of orgasm, but without actually getting there. And that's part of the connection. And there are lots of techniques, from breathing techniques to, as I said, tantric sensuality, to meditation and yoga. And it is quite elaborated field. You can really delve into that. And if a couple is looking to do it together, there's coaches out there that you can go and explore, courses that you can find. If you want to do it through the internet, there's some ladies, people that give courses that you can do it even online on your own, to find your own inner goddess of orgasm and pleasure and sensuality, which is part of the foreplay. You don't necessarily have to, it's not all about the penetration. So it can take many forms. It depends on the lifestyle, it depends on where you are in your relationship, it depends what you like to do. Some people don't like foreplay. Some girls just said, no, I don't want all that putsy. I just want to have your penis in my vagina, and it's also okay, you get that as well. But everything that we do, as I say, buy her flowers, it's foreplay. Lying around, just go snuggle in front of the television with hot chocolate, that's also foreplay. Everything counts for that. That is the intimacy, that is the connection. Even just discussing the topic is a foreplay. A lot of people, just by talking about it, they feel aroused and excited and ready for action, just by talking a little bit about what they want and around the topic of their sexuality.
Yeah, I think if anything, that, when I work with couples, and that is to say, first of all, don't compare your relationship to anybody else, because your relationship is different and it's unique to you. Second of all, there is no normal in terms of how many times and how often and what kind of sex you should be having. By default, you're going to have a combination of quickies, you're going to have a combination of makeup sex, you're going to have a combination of where you really take your time and enjoy each other's bodies and pleasure, and you're going to have a combination of where you're just too tired and you're just going to do it, and you're going to roll over and go to sleep, and that's life, and it happens. And so I think it's around, most important is creating a space and emotional safety where you can talk to each other about it, where you can understand your wants and needs and how to please each other, and that sex is more when it comes to your whole body. It's not just, as you said, a nipple here, a nipple there, and then that's it, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It's really about getting to know each other from head to toe. I always say to my couples, think of your partner's body as a blank canvas, and you are the artist. And the picture that you're painting is by getting to know every inch of their body and what turns them on and what turns them off. Because the last thing you want to be doing is thinking that you're turning your partner on when in fact you're actually having the opposite effect. You're turning them off. And that sex will come and go. The intimacy will come and go. It's part of life, just like energy ebbs and flows. Some days you have good days, some days you have bad days, bad hair days. It's the same in our sexual life and our sexual routine. And it's about managing as it comes, so being there for each other and supporting each other throughout the process and the journey, and that it takes intentionality and effort to show up and to be there and make each other and your relationship and sex a priority, and not let it fall to the back seat, because that's when problems come into the relationship.
Yep. I think we covered it.
I think we have. I've certainly enjoyed chatting to you. I just want to see if there's any last minute comments or questions from anybody. Now's your chance. Or just, if you've got some value or some insights from the session, if it's helped you, we'd really love to hear, and let us know if there's any other topics. We may consider doing another webinar if there is a request or a need for it. We're happy to, because this is a very vast topic. So, Gwen, thank you, ladies. Most informative session. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody.